Welcome to another episode of the ever increasingly exciting and riveting Untitled American Football Show with your host Peter Bradbury, as always. Bit to get through on this week's show, seeing as I am doing it very much later than unplanned, so I will be pretty much rushing through things. As it is, last week was the first ever Super Wildcard Weekend for the NFL. So we will be touching, or featuring heavily, mostly, of all of the 6 matchups that took place last weekend. And then we shall have a brief overview of the upcoming games this coming weekend. So, starting off in Buffalo, and it's all the Bills taking on the Indianapolis Colts at Bills Stadium. We'll go through the scores and then I will kind of give my take on things, which will be completely different from what everyone else thinks. So, in the first quarter, it saw the Buffalo Bills taking a 7-3 lead. That was thanks to a Dawson Knox 3-yard catch from Josh Allen, with Rodrigo Blankenship originally putting the Colts ahead with a 30-yard field goal. Into the second quarter, it saw Jonathan Taylor with another one of his good runs this year, as he scored on a short gain play to make it 10-7 for the Colts. Right at the back end of the first half, it saw Josh Allen running in for a 5-yard score to give the Bills a 14-10 lead heading into the halftime break. In the third quarter, it saw Taylor Bass kicking a 46-yard field goal to make it a 10-17 game in favour of the hosts. And then we saw quite a bit of action in the fourth quarter, as it saw Stefon Diggs scoring on a 35-yard play to put the Bills 24-10. Zach Pascal then scored on a 9-yard pass with a failed 2-point conversion to make it still a kind of 2-possession game. Taylor Bass then kicked a 54-yard field goal to make it 27-16. And then the Colts had the last say with a 27-yard pass from Phillip Rivers in what could be his final game. But I don't think it will be personally, but that's my take. But Jack Doyle caught a 27-yard pass to see the Colts 3 points within the Bills with a 2-point conversion. And the game ended on what has been the Bills' kryptonite, as I put in my blog for the games this past week, with a Hail Mary. Because considering this season, from pretty much most of the times I've seen a Hail Mary being thrown in games, against the Bills at least, it has resulted in a touchdown. With obviously the Kyler Murray, or Hail Murray throw as it has been named by some people in the game. But that was swatted down by Micah Hyde at the end of the game to make sure the Bills prevailed. So 27-24, the Bills, your winners. I did write this game, there's 2 ways to look at it. There's the Bills learnt their lessons from last year in the playoffs, where they seem to be in a good place and just kind of blew it. The other side is the Colts, because Frank Reich, the start of the game, you can say that he got things bang on with his game plan, so to speak. Mostly because for pretty much until Josh Allen, put the Bills ahead at the end of the first half, the Colts were in the game. And to be fair, they were still really in the game till right to the end. But it was how the Colts seemed to unravel. So they'd started off not allowing the Bills to kind of get too far ahead or even take over the contest, because for a large part of the early stages it was the Colts that were the better team. So credit has to go to Reich and his offense and his defense on that kind of thing. A turning point, you could say, was, I think it was the second quarter, where it saw a Blankenship field goal hitting the uprights. From that point onwards, it did seem to see the tide almost turn, if you will, for the home side. But then there was kind of a field goal when it was, I think it was 10-4, when it was 10-7, which was, they went for a fourth down, I think it was. There was just a couple of weird and sort of unnecessarily overly aggressive, we have to go for a fourth down, and just some of the plays, I think they overthinked it, or overthought it, is probably the better term of grammar. So on that side of things, you could say the Colts were more masters of their own downfall than really the Bills were. Overall, it was a really entertaining, fun game to watch, because there's been many games this year that I've been watching on Sky, or maybe not so much the Bears, but it's just been a case of some of the games have had ups and downs, and you kind of dip in and out of kind of the games. The Colts and the Bills was one of the very few I recall this year that I kind of watched all the way through. And it really was an entertaining game, because I think before the match you probably would have thought Bills will kind of win by a fair few. The Colts, if they played it right, would have run them close, and they did. But at the same time, I think, looking back now, and especially how close it was, they will probably kick themselves for not doing better than they did. But I mean, one thing you have to say as well is Josh Allen, I think, shown that he is definitely grown up, especially a quarterback. The regular season's all fine and well. Regular season is kind of the bread and butter, so to speak. However, when you get to the playoffs, that's when it really counts. Josh Allen really shown something in this game. Looking at his stats, 324 yards, 2 touchdowns, rushing for 54 yards, 11 carries, 1 touchdown. I mean, and even on the touchdown to Knox, originally it was a designed run play, but he had not the perseverance. Yeah, perseverance. Well, it's probably not the term I'm really thinking of, but he was scanning the field, realised the run play wasn't particularly on, decided to hold on to the ball, went to run, spotted Knox in his vision, just dumped a little pass over the top of the defence, straight to him, touchdown. Last year that probably doesn't happen, but I think he has definitely grown as a quarterback in more ways than one. And the phrase that Shaquille O'Neal uses, to use the basketball side, is something that he always brings up, that Michael Jordan told him, and it was, before you succeed, you must learn to fail. For Josh Allen, I think last year was his moment of realising, I failed, and this year I'm going to make more of a success of it. Which, credit to him, he could easily have just kind of fell by the wayside, or just had a really bad season, become an average QB. I think the way he has played this year, and the way the Bills as a team have played, is a lot down to how he has played the game, scanned the field, his play calls. Also, offense needs a lot of credit as well. But I think if Allen is the Allen of last season, then they don't make the playoffs, and they definitely do not win this wildcard game. But, again, my personal view. Next up is the LA Rams and the Seattle Seahawks at Lumen Field. The sides met a couple of weeks back in the divisional title in the NFC West. On that occasion, it saw the Seahawks prevailing over the Rams. So you could say that LA came in with something to prove. And also heading into this game, it saw the Rams having a bit of a conundrum for Sean McVay, at quarterback at least, in the fact that they had Jared Goff, who had recently just come off surgery for a broken thumb and dislocation that he suffered in that divisional title loss. And then last week they had John Wolford, who had never snapped, really, a ball, I think they were saying. I probably confused that with another player. But anyway, it was his first start at least. And saw him having a fairly decent, solid game for a first-time starter in the Rams' win over the Arizona Cardinals. So heading into this game, a fair few people predicted it was going to be Goff that would get the start, but for the mobility-wise, and even sometimes the passing as well, Wolford was preferred by McVay. So heading into this, it was a pretty much defensive opening quarter, but then people thinking who was going to make the start, Wolford or Goff, that pretty much got answered fairly quickly on both sides, as Wolford got the starter's job. However, he opted to show his mobility, tried to pick up a couple of yards and look for the first down. Unfortunately, he decided to go head first, trying to leap and get the extra yards needed. Unfortunately, he took a hit from Adams from the Seahawks to the head. Sustained a concussion, I think they've admitted since. So he came out the game. Saw Jared Goff come in, kind of surgically repaired thumb and all. So the first point to the board went to LA with a 40-yard Matt Gay field goal. Then the sides traded field goals, with the Rams leading 6-3. A Darius Williams 42-yard interception return for the Rams put them 13-3 up. DK Metcalf then scored on a 51-yard play thanks to a good pass from Russell Wilson. That made it 13-10. The Rams then ended the first half of things with a 5-yard run from Cam Akers to see the Rams 10 points up at the halftime break, with the score at 20-10. However, we then saw it's almost become a staple. I want to say staple down. That's not the term I'm really thinking of. The staple, if you will, of Rams halftime games when ahead. That is, whenever the Rams are ahead, the same graphic pops up for Sean McVay, indicates that in 36 games, the Rams, when ahead, have never lost. Never lost. So would this see the end of that streak, or would the Rams carry it on? Well, in the third, it saw a Jason Myers 52-yard field goal being kicked over for 2013. Into the fourth quarter, a Matt Gay field goal from 36 yards out made it a 10-point game again. Then saw a Robert Woods 15-yard touchdown to make it 30-13. And at the end of the game, it saw a DK Metcalf 12-yard catch, making it a 10-yard deficit again with 2:28 to play. However, with the Rams needing to kind of shut out the Seattle offense in the closing stages, it saw Seattle going for a fourth, and I believe it was a 4, but I will double check. 4th and 15, sorry. So with 1:31 to play, they tried to get a playoff. Wilson got sacked, and that was literally the game. I mean, they did have to. Well, they had a couple of kneels towards the end of the game, which kind of sounds like a Welsh thing, but yes, the Rams prevailed 32-20 and sees the McVay halftime streak now progressing to 37-0. So the Rams, they make next weekend, or this weekend as it is now. So they join the Bills, and next we will touch on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Washington football team. Next up, we will take a look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Washington football team. On paper, it looked a foregone conclusion. However, Washington are one of those teams that have produced a shock along the way this year. Just ask the Steelers for that case. So going into the game, Washington saw their quarterback, who was 5-1 this season since he came in. That was Alex Smith. So he was ruled out with a calf injury, which he's struggled with for a few weeks now. So that saw the quarterback of Taylor Heinicke. So he came in and had the unenviable job, if you kind of want to say that, of taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers side. So looking at the scoring, so a field goal put the Buccaneers up 3-0. A 36-yard pass from Brady to Antonio Brown made it a 9-0 game. In the second quarter, Washington got on the board thanks to a J.D. McKissick 2-yard play. Chris Godwin then got a 27-yard pass from Brady to make it a 15-7 game. A Ryan Suckup 23-yard field goal made it 18-7 at the half. In the third, Washington got the better of it. That was after a Dustin Hopkins field goal, a Tyler Heineke 8-yard run, in a game that saw point conversions being an absolute premium due to the fact that both sides struggled. Because in the first half, you had Tampa Bay missing a point after touchdown that was blocked, and also attempted a 2-point conversion run play, and that failed. So when Washington attempted a 2-point play themselves, that failed. So that made it a closer game than it kind of was, at 18-16. However, in the fourth quarter, the Buccaneers kind of just began to edge slowly away. That was thanks to a 38-yard field goal. Leonard Fournette then scored on a 3-yard run to make it 28-16. Steven Sims Jr. then scored on an 11-yard pass to make it 28-23, with the Washington side trying to pull it back with a 5-point deficit. However, a field goal right towards the end of the game made pretty much the contest safe for Tampa Bay, and sees them setting up a tasty divisional playoff game next weekend. I won't tell you who, but you'll pretty much find out fairly soon. Looking at the overview of the box score, so Heineke in his first game, 306 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Not really bad stats for someone that's never snapped a ball, especially in postseason football. But then when you kind of look at the master on the other side of things, so you have Tom Brady, 381 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, what can you say about Brady that hasn't already been said? I mean, I was going to touch on my thoughts about the Buccaneers, but I will do that at the end, because I think that'll be a much better way to kind of explain my thinking. So, the Buccaneers win 31-23, and they advance to the next round. We come to Sunday. It saw the opening game of the Sunday games, even. Just go along with me. So that's the Baltimore Ravens travelling to the Nissan Stadium to take on the Tennessee Titans in a game where the previous one ended up in a overtime victory for the Titans, but also saw a couple of incidents that occurred. So it was kind of when Lamar Jackson was going through his crisis of confidence in a sense with the Ravens at that time. It was also the game where Tennessee players were doing their pre-game huddle on the Ravens logo, and saw a bit of bad blood in the game, and would kind of slightly creep back into it, as we will discuss a bit in a minute. So, scoring wise, this saw Tennessee getting out onto a 10-0 lead That was through a A.J. Brown 10-yard catch from Ryan Tannehill. And then a 45-yard field goal with 1:38 left in the first quarter made it 10-zip. And some of the questions heading into this game was, could the Ravens defend against Derrick Henry, and could they pretty much keep their recent good form going? The first quarter was... It didn't tell you everything. I'll kind of just leave it at that. Though they were holding Henry to not many yards at all. So defensive side, they were doing their bit, but the offense needed to come to the party. Second quarter, the Ravens came to play. 33-yard field goal even from Justin Tucker made it 10-3. Then saw a fantastic solo run by Lamar Jackson for a 48-yard run play to make it 10-10. And pretty much saw the Ravens from this point, I feel at least, taking over the game and seeing the tide turn, because Tennessee did seem to rely fairly heavily on Henry to eventually break the shackles of the defensive the Ravens' defense even. And was he was stopped all ends in the entire game. I think once the Ravens stopped Henry, it was almost a case of we've disarmed their biggest weapon now. Now we just kind of do what we do best. And that's pretty much what happened. A J.K. Dobbins 4-yard run into the end zone, sending Titans players flying in the end zone. Put the Ravens 17-10 up. In the fourth, it saw field goals being traded, with Stephen Gostkowski with a 25-yard field goal, and then Justin Tucker sealing the game for 20-13. I think it was a minute to go. It saw Ryan Tannehill throwing an interception right at the end of the game. And like I said, with the logo incident, they celebrated after I think it was Marcus Peters caught the pass. Peters caught the interception, and the Baltimore players decided to run straight to the logo, either stomped on the logo, sat on the logo, made kicking motions, or just celebrated as much as they could, because they knew that they had won the game, and it was them saying, you disrespect our logo, we will disrespect yours. Which, in today's age, a lot of people are saying it was classless, it was unneeded, you won the game, just get on with it. But I do think, and I think it was touched on Good Morning Football, this is, in a sense, great for the league to have some kind of needle in rivalry in the league. Because, the only rivalry you really get now is kind of the quarterback matchups. They don't really kind of face one another or tackle one another. The closest one in recent times has probably been the Ravens and the Steelers. So to have two teams that seem to be having this kind of rivalry of sorts in recent times, I am all for it, personally. I do enjoy when there's a bit of needle to games. As long as it doesn't go overboard, then I am perfectly happy for kind of, not the bad blood, but I think you do enjoy when two teams hate one another, because you do tend to get decent games. And this was definitely one game that was, you could arguably say it was a slightly slow burner. in a sense. But overall, it was worth watching. Not so much if you're a Titans fan, or especially if you was Derrick Henry, which, looking at his stats, 18 carries, 40 yards. And so for a man that's had 2,000 yards this season in the league, to only get 40 shows how good the Baltimore defence was in this game. But you could arguably say that there's been a few teams that have kind of slowly begun to kind of work him out in certain things. But that aside, Baltimore, Lamar Jackson, 170 yards, 179 yards even, one interception, which was early in the game. Rushing wise, almost as many rushing yards as passing yards. 16 carries, 136 rushing yards, one touchdown. I mean, take the Jackson from the previous meeting and then put him in this one. Two different players. One was like a rabbit in the headlights. One was pretty much an on-form, almost getting to the MVP-like Lamar of last season. To which I kind of feel the dip he had during the season has been the best thing that could have happened to this team, because now the Ravens do seem to be one of them teams that a few weeks ago you would have just thought, will they make the playoffs? Could they make the playoffs? They do look like a team, if providing they can get past who they play this weekend, could arguably be an outsider to win the Super Bowl. Or, of course, they could just lose this weekend, and what I've just said is a complete pile of crap. So, take that with a salt mine in Siberia. For Tannehill, 165 yards, one touchdown, one interception. Tannehill's done really well with Tennessee this year. He's led them in games. There's been games where when they haven't relied on Henry, he's kind of stepped up. But then to bring it back to the needle that I said a couple of minutes ago, the end of the game saw Jackson and the Ravens running off the field to celebrate. Henry's then come on social media to say that it was classless and disrespectful. But like I said, when you get two teams that hate one another, and as long as it doesn't boil over and becomes over the top, I am all for it. And I'm hoping that they play one another next year at least. So, fingers crossed they do. Well, now comes the worst game for me to talk about. If I had a swear button, I would probably be using it profusely. So, the Chicago Bears rolled into Louisiana to take on the New Orleans Saints, headed by Drew Brees. It was a... Sorry, I'm just having next door blasting their music out. The game as a Bears fan was pretty much Bears football in 2020. For the Saints, I mean, I don't even think they got out of first gear, but then I don't even think they got out of neutral. This is how one-sided the game truly was. So the notes on this is going to be longer than the actual scoring. So the first quarter saw Michael Thomas with an 11-yard pass easing his way into the end zone for a 7-0 lead. In the second quarter, it saw a Cairo Santos increasing his Bears franchise record with field goals, and just kicks in general, with a 36-yard field goal to make it 7-3. Pretty much as exciting as it got for the Bears. Latavius Murray then caught a 6-yard pass in the third quarter to make it 14-3. Alvin Kamara then went in for a 3-yard run. That made it 21-3. And then something that kind of summed up the Bears this season was the final play of the game, with two players that are unlikely, I feel, to be there. That was Mitchell Trubisky, the quarterback, throwing a 19-yard pass to Jimmy Graham, who caught the pass and ended up running straight through the end zone and into pretty much the tunnel that heads to the locker room, because this, I mean, you didn't want to be even known that you was playing for the Bears in this game. This is how bad they were. So, to be honest, heading into this game, no one gave the Bears a chance, which was pretty much correct. They didn't have a chance. Was it a foregone conclusion the Bears would lose and the Saints would win? Yes. So, there really is nothing I can say. Did we learn anything about the Saints? No. Did we learn anything about the Bears other than them being horrible? No. So, we'll look at the stats, and then I'll get onto the moan, and then I'll get onto the happy bit, if there is anything. So, quarterback-wise, Mitchell Trubisky, 199 yards, one touchdown. Must be a very rarity. He did not throw an interception in this game, which I can't remember too many times he hasn't thrown an interception. Though I'm sure if my friend Joe was listening or watching this, he'll probably let me know. So the Saints had Drew Brees, 265 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Taysom Hill had one attempt in quarterback. We'd taken an age to which he could have been the human egg timer. He took that long. So his throw went right up in the air, was intercepted, but being the Bears, no offence, didn't make anything of it other than really the field goal for Santos. Right, the rants. Well, Javon Wims, who after the last game against the Saints, where he punched CJ Joyner-Gardner, CJ Gardner Johnson. I'm confusing it with someone I've just watched. After he tried to punch him, and he couldn't even punch him then. That's how bad the Bears have been. They can't catch. Obviously, we'll talk about wins. They can't catch. They struggle to run the ball, really, unless it's been Montgomery, who didn't really feature at all in this game. There was just so much bad with the Bears on every aspect. Defense was terrible. Chuck Pagano's final game, with him now retiring. Some of the play calling was ridiculous. I think for me, the defining moment of this game for the Bears standpoint was Mitchell Trubisky running for a first down, opting not to kind of put his body on the line and show that he is not a great or even a good quarterback. He is average, and no one can tell me different. He refused to stretch out and pick up an extra yard or two, which could have got a first down. opted to run out of bounds on a 4th down. So a turnover on downs. I think the Saints then scored from the resulting play, or the resulting drive. If they didn't, they might as well have done. And then we had Anthony Miller opting to then punch CJ Gardner-Johnson and make him the second Bear this season to be ejected from a game following Wims, who dropped the easiest catch he will ever have in his career, but then he should be nowhere near a Bears uniform following his ejection earlier in the season. So, I mean, it was the best trick play the Bears have done all season. And so, the ball coming back to Trubisky. Trubisky threw arguably his greatest ever pass as a Bear, or would have been a great pass. Launches it into the end zone. Wims, uncontested, on his own. Ball comes to him, straight through the hands. Yeah, let's just kind of leave it at that, shall we? To which, from my thing, and has angered me and many Bears fans, is the last couple of days where George McCaskey, one of the owners of the Bears, has kept on pace and Nagy for another year with the words impressive being the term to describe them. Impressively bad, yes. Impressively incompetent in Pace's terms of trading for poor first-round picks and bringing in Foles and opting to go for Trubisky ahead of Mahomes and Watson. Yeah, impressively terrible. But despite the game and what happened, the highlight, because I managed to see it eventually somehow, was the game being featured on Nickelodeon, which was kind of apt, being as it was kids' play. So the game featured the slime zone, which was the end zone, which was done to entice kids and bring more eyes onto the product for younger viewers. To which watching it on Sky and watching it on Nickelodeon, I watched the Nickelodeon because it was far more, probably my mindset, if anything. So you had former Detroit player in Nate Burleson being the expert commentator, but explained things in far easier, or explained concepts far easier than that of, say, you would from like a Tony Romo or a Troy Aikman or an adult-wise announcer. And you also had the slime cannons when an end zone went in. Fortunately, the Bears didn't score, because if they'd scored, cannons probably wouldn't have gone off, or it would have just released a tiny bit of slime. But yes, the Saints won 21-9. That's my Bears rant done for this season. And we will... Oh, and it also sees next weekend Breeze versus Brady 3 at the Superdome. Oh, we come to the final game of the weekend. And the rivalry between Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. So last weekend saw the teams facing in the final week of the regular season, with the second string or third string Steelers being edged out to a full strength of sorts Cleveland side. So everyone had this pretty much down for being a Cleveland loss, and the Steelers progressing on and seeing provisional games against them and the Bills, as I think they were tipped. So, after that drink, this is what happened. Kickoff. The first play of the game saw Maurice Pouncey sailing the ball over Ben Roethlisberger's head. The ball rolled into the end zone. The Steelers didn't bother trying to make an attempt to grab it. Even Roethlisberger just kind of stood there. Cal Joseph got the fumble recovery in the end zone to make it a 7-0 or 7-0 lead even, with Cody Parkey kicking the extra. And you thought, right, the Steelers, that's the wake-up call for the Steelers. Not in the first quarter. Never happened. The best term to say was it was an absolute blitz of points for the Browns. So you had Jarvis Landry scoring on a 40-yard play, Kareem Hunt scoring on an 11-yard run and an 8-yard run to see Cleveland leading 28-0 after the first quarter. 28-0 in Pittsburgh against a team that they haven't beaten in a long time, especially in Pittsburgh, to which I think it was 2003 the last time they won, where it was 13-3. So yeah, it was a bit of a one-sided opening quarter. Second quarter saw Pittsburgh getting the advantage in the second quarter, points-wise, as a 1-yard James Conner touchdown. Austin Hooper then found himself wide open with a very quick pass from Baker Mayfield to make it 35-7 Cleveland. Chris Boswell then kicked over a 49-yard field goal to make it 35-10 at the half, and see Pittsburgh needing a massive response to kind of overturn this deficit. But being the Browns, it could still have happened. So, moving to the third, an Eric Ebron 17-yard play made it 35-16 with a touchdown for the Steelers. Juju Smith-Schuster then scored himself on a 5-yard play, who's had an eventful year, shall we say, and made the comments that the Browns are the Browns. Sometimes you just think players just need to shut up and just not say anything. So we go to the fourth quarter with it 35-23. Pittsburgh had the Browns on the ropes after the third quarter. A then bizarre punt in midfield kind of let the Browns off. So that then saw Nick Chubb scoring a touchdown for the Browns on a 40-yard play to make it 42-23. Chase Claypool then made it 42-29. Cody Parkey then kicked over 2 field goals for the Browns to take it to 48-29. And then in the closing stages saw Chase Claypool grabbing his second touchdown of the game on a 7-yard play with a 2-point conversion made. And I think the image at the end, which will be played for a while, of pretty much Ben Roethlisberger sat despondent on the bench, pondering into the ether, and then walking off the field of play in floods of tears with possibly the realisation that this could be his final game in a Steelers uniform, or even his final game completely. So it's going to be an interesting off-season for the Steel City team. The stats-wise, I mean, what I kind of didn't mention as well in the opening quarter was the fact that Roethlisberger threw for 3 interceptions, which is unheard of. You might get 3 in a game over the 4 quarters, but in 1 quarter alone, Cleveland pretty much won this game. So if we look at stats, Baker Mayfield, 263 yards, 3 touchdowns, quarterback rating of 92.8. Flip that to Roethlisberger, 501 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. There cannot have been many games where a quarterback has thrown for a shed load, and I'll say that again, shed load of yardage, but at the same time thrown for as many touchdowns as interceptions. That is 3 or more. They can't have been too many. And then on top of that, you had Cleveland's running game. Nick Chubb, 76 yards. 76 yards rushing, 69 receiving with a touchdown. Kareem Hunt on the ground was lethal. 8 carries, 48 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry, 5 receiving, 92 yards, 1 touchdown. Pretty much everyone in Cleveland did their job. For Pittsburgh, defensive-wise, seemed a bit of a worry, I suppose you could say. Offense took a while to fire up. But yeah, plus it was also the first time since 1988 that the Browns had made it 2 wins over their AFC rival. So if you're a Cleveland fan, you are cock a hoop. If you're a Steelers fan, you're kind of thinking, where do we go from here now? Because it seemed a promising season at 11-0, and now you are wondering quarterback-wise what's going to happen with the cap space changing. You've got an offense which seems to be hit and miss at times, and a defense that should not have played, or should not have given up 28 points in the opening quarter. Excuses have been that because they hadn't played together last week, that a break in weeks can be a very negative. However, to use that logic, when it's Super Bowl, there is always a week in between, so that doesn't really hold much water in a sense. But yeah, great win for the Browns, it has to be said. So, the upcoming games this weekend sees on the Saturday the LA Rams taking on the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field, seeing as the NFC title will go through Lambeau Field. So the Rams 4-4 away, the Packers 7-1 at home. I mean, the NFC has been a really strange division in the fact that no one's really dominated it. You could also say it's weaker than the AFC, but it's going to be an interesting contest between the two teams. So if we have a look at the head-to-heads, it sees the Rams getting the better of the Packers the last time by 2 points. However, the Packers have literally beaten... just scanning the field now. Scanning the results, as I say now. The Packers... What's it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the last 11 games, the Rams have won once, which kind of tells you that this could be a very one-sided contest if the Rams' defense doesn't spark, and especially if the offense doesn't spark, because it does seem a case of the Rams, I feel, need to score at least maybe 25, maybe 25 or more points to win. Anything less, I think it's Green Bay that's going to take this, which isn't very joyful of me to say. As a Bears fan, it's not fun at all. But that's how it is. So if we move to the other game, that being the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC, this could be the game of the week for me. So if we have a look, so the Ravens beat the Bills last time out a couple of years ago. The Bills' last win came in 2013. But saying that the Bills have won, was it 7 straight now? And if you take away that disheartening loss against the Arizona Cardinals, the only loss you can say was terrible was the game against the Titans. The loss against Kansas City probably came a bit too early for them. The loss to Arizona was just, you don't want to say a fluke, but could have been preventable, to put it that way. But yeah, it's got the hallmarks to be an entertaining and tough playoff game. And plus the fact that it's at Bill Stadium, where fans will be in attendance, so the Bills Mafia will get to see their side at least playing another game. And then we move to Kansas City and Cleveland. Good Morning Football played an interesting video yesterday of Mahomes and Mayfield, in the fact that Mayfield had invited Mahomes to come to Texas Tech and was pretty much his kind of invitee to try and bring him to, or lure him, so to speak, to Texas Tech College, University. Did so, but then Mayfield fell out of love with Texas Tech, moved to Oklahoma. The sides met, played out a game that had no defense in the entire game. It was pretty much Mahomes versus Mayfield at Texas Tech, with many with like traitor shirts for Mayfield coming back. on that day, Mayfield won the battle. But I think for the Browns in this game, there is a case of Kansas City being too overconfident in the fact that they haven't really faced anyone or come up against anything strong, really. I mean, the loss to the Raiders early doors, I think that was just they thought they were invincible, still coming off the Super Bowl win. To which seems it was more of a blip than anything, that loss. Cleveland seems to have done everything the hard way. You could arguably make a case that pretty much most teams will have Cleveland pulling for them. So it is interesting to see how the quarterbacks do again. I mean, I can see a shock. I can see Cleveland shocking them if they play to the levels of the Pittsburgh first quarter. I think if they play less than that, I think the Chiefs will have a bit too much. But I may take the easy option and say Kansas City. So, as much as I'm kind of pulling for the Browns, I think Kansas will win. The final game sees, as I said before, the third installment of Tom Brady versus Drew Brees this season. The Saints having a 2-0 record against the Bucks, both blowout wins. The last one being Brady's worst ever loss in the NFL. I don't think you'll find many people hoping Tampa Bay win because of the Brady effect. I do like the Saints, but I think having watched, I think the Saints are an ebb and flow team, and the fact they've not really been consistent. They've won ugly games, but then they do say if you can win ugly, it's a sign of champions. Tampa Bay is a very inconsistent team. They can win fantastic and destroy a side, and then the following week play terrible and get blown out. It's such a tough game to. It's probably the toughest game to call out of all of them. I mean, barring the Bills and the Ravens, this could also be one of those games that gets hyped so much it turns out to be a poor contest. I'm going to go Saints. So, of course, that probably means I'm 0-4 on my picks. But looking at them, the Packers, as much as I want the Bills to win, I can see the Ravens winning. Chiefs will beat the Browns, and the Saints will beat the Bucks. So pretty much I've gone for almost a clean sweep of the home teams, barring from Buffalo. But it's, I mean, other than the first game, Packers and Rams, the three others look really entertaining, competitive games. Yeah, it's going to be fun. That's what we can say. So, yeah, there's not really much I can add to that, really. So we just have to wait and see. But yes, sorry, I'm just dawdling and daydreaming to myself. But that brings this show to an end. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. If you've been watching me just staring at random stuff, trying to look as what's the word? Lively, I suppose, is the word. But yes, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching even. And hopefully I will have put this out well before the first kickoff game, and hopefully next week will be out far sooner. So from me, Peter Bradbury, signing off. Enjoy your divisional games. Hope your team wins. Hopefully Bears do something this week to cheer me up, but I'm very much doubting it. But yes, for now, enjoy football and good night.